Hi, I'm Reggie Brooks, Executive Director of the Holtz Heroes Foundation, and welcome to the Chris Zorich podcast as we celebrate Black History Month and some of the legendary players from the Lou Holtz era.
Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of the Zorich podcast. I've teamed up with the Holtz Heroes Foundation to celebrate Black History Month. We'll be interviewing some amazing student athletes who became instant legends during their time at Notre Dame during the Lou Holtz era. One of those amazing student athletes, and I may have to say a student again, so to speak, is our guest, Jerome Bettis. Part of this, and this really hurts to say it, but I think that 1990 recruiting class may have been one of the best in modern day history. I'm not sure, but I
not sure. The best.
Credit. I do have to say it. It is the best because it just y'all had some straight up studs. First round draft pick of the Los Angeles Rams, Super Bowl champion, Pro Football Hall of Famer, and a true Notre Dame legend, and need I say current senior in school?
Yes, that is correct. But you know what? Let's talk about that a little bit later. But yes, I am
fair enough.
A current senior at Notre Dame right now.
Interesting. I cannot wait to kind of unpack that a little bit. The idea of kind of celebrating Black History Month came from Reggie Brooks. You know, he really kind of talked about the idea with me. He's like, hey, man, we have such great athletes that played during Holtz's era. And not only are they great athletes, but they're great guys. And so he wanted to highlight them. And so, great, Chris, do you mind doing this? And I was like, absolutely not. Kind of jumped at the opportunity. And obviously, with the kind of really what's going on with you, you've kind of shown that leadership way beyond the field. You've done some amazing things, business, everything else, and you just up and decided to go back and finish your degree. How did that come out?
Well, actually, what happened was there had been discussions throughout the years. Obviously, when you come back to Notre Dame, come back for a football game, or come back to do an appearance for something, and so there's always this conversation that I would have with people in administration, namely people in the provost office, saying, "Hey, okay, you need to consider going back to school." And I'm like, and this was years ago, and it sounded good, 8, 9, 10 years ago when I 15 actually now when I retired.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, I think, but life happens, and kids, and I'm raising kids, and I'm making sure I'm doing the best thing that I could possibly do for them. Mm-hmm. It was never about myself, and so what happened was, COVID happened and really presented an opportunity, because I knew my last year on campus my last year of school had to be done on campus.
Right. Okay.
So that really excluded the whole idea of me finishing, because I said, there's no way I can go back to Notre Dame for
right.
With all the things that I'm doing. So when COVID happened, I said, you know what? Let me consider this, because this might be an opportunity. So I jumped on it, and I was able to get in school virtually for the second semester of last year. I was like, wow, great.
Okay.
And then I got that done, and I was able to do summer school. And then I thought to myself, man, can I do the fall the same way? But the fall had changed. They said we were doing in-person learning. And I said, uh-oh, that's not a good idea. And so I knew I couldn't go to school in the fall because of my obligations during the football season.
Sure.
So I said to myself, can I do it in the winter and the spring? Do I have a window where I can really commit to going to school, being in South Bend? And then I talked to my family, talked to my wife, talked to the kids, and they said, go ahead, Dad.
Wow.
You talk so much about education. Let's see you back it up. And I said, you know what? I promised my mother that I would graduate years and years ago. My kids are watching. I preach to them about education is the key.
Right.
And I need to really step up and do the things that I've always said were necessary for the family. And so here I am.
Now, the idea of walking into class with maybe a laptop now, no longer pencil and paper, whatever. It's been a couple of years since you may have been in class. How is it going for you now?
It was it's going well now, but when I first got here, there was a huge technology gap because, like you said, I was used to pen and paper. There was no computers. There was no like laptops and stuff that people were just all over the place with. You know, there was like maybe a kid in the dorm had a computer on his desk, but nobody had a laptop.
Right.
You know? And so now kids are typing in class, and I'm like looking around like, what is going on?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm trying to write, and it's just so crazy, the technology and how everything has advanced. So it took me 2 weeks to really catch up and figure out how I was going to attack this process, how I was going to do it. So it's been a challenge, but obviously, anything worth having is going to be difficult, right? So I knew it was going to be tough. I expected it. I just didn't expect the technology to be the issue. I thought, obviously, the class that was going, and it was. It's been challenging, but that the technology was a tough part. And then I just turned 50 last week.
Happy birthday!
It was funny because one of my professors came to me and said, thank you. And my professor said, I normally acknowledge, the young people, their birthday, regardless if they want to or not. I acknowledge it, right? And so he says, you want me to acknowledge it? I said, nah, probably not. It's like, I'm old enough to be these kids' father, so I want to probably say no. I'm turning 50, and most of these kids are 20. Right. And so I'm saying to myself, 2021, I said, you know what, let's probably just stay away from the birthday thing. And so he laughed, he got a kick out of it, and I got a kick out of it as well.
That is great. And I'm not going to ask you who your favorite professor is, but how about a class? Do you have a kind of favorite class you got going on now?
You know what? I like them all, but I've got a class, I think it's the spirituality of work. Really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Just speaks to how companies use work as a vocation and not as a job. People go to work with a purpose. Companies, they're created with their purpose, their mission statement. All the things they do, they align with their Christian values. So it was really interesting because obviously, being in a different place where all of the kids are in class, they're trying to get a job. Right. And here I am managing a couple companies, and I'm saying, I understand it because I'm in the position to institute that philosophy. So I'm looking at all of these classes much differently because of the position that I'm in.
Sure. Well, one of the interesting perspectives you have, being a former footballer at Notre Dame, having a chance to have an amazing career in the NFL, now being back on campus, there's almost like another responsibility you kind of have. And I want to kind of show a little clip because you gave some really inspirational words to the football team recently. And for those folks who may not have seen it, here they are.
You gotta want it. And you gotta want the guy next to you to want it. And if you don't, you gotta push him because that's what we are. That's why it's called a teammate. It's your teammate. So you want the best for him just like you want the best for yourself. So you gotta push him. And this is when it happens, guys. This is when you come together, when nobody's watching, when nobody sees the effort that you're putting in. When you decide to do it here, that's when it show up on the scoreboard.
That's awesome, man. I mean, how was that feeling? Kind of talking to the team and kind of imparting some wisdom.
It was great because, all the information that I've gathered through all my years of playing with all of you guys, I mean, being a youngster when you were there and developing and growing and learning, experiencing, developing my own stripes, and then going off in the NFL, learning. All that kind of has prepared me to be in this position where now I can help influence these young men and explain to them why they're doing what they're doing, the benefits that they should be getting out of it, and what to expect later on. So just trying to give them a full gamut of life, and through the perspective of a player who sat where they're sitting,
Exactly.
you know, who's in classes that they're in right now,
Literally.
but literally, right? But understands what they're thinking at every stage, from the freshman who just got here, whose eyes are big as ever, saying, "Man, this guy's huge," right? Looking and all the way down to that senior who's saying to himself, "Okay, now I got to get ready for the draft and the next stage of my life." So I've been there at all of these points. And what I want to do is be a resource for these guys and let them know that I'm here. I'm available to you guys. I'm on campus. I'm a student. And if you want to just talk, bend my ear.
Wow.
I'm a wealth of knowledge and information, and I want to pay it forward.
That is absolutely amazing. I mean, think about, had you had that opportunity to reach out to someone who kind of had,
Goodness.
really, like, the learning curve becomes so much quicker when you have a chance to have access to an individual like yourself on campus. Kind of along those lines, I'm assuming you had at least a couple conversations with Marcus Freeman. How do you feel about him being the new head coach?
To the table. I really like his energy, how he's attacking the position, what he wants to do, how he's trying to infuse that energy into the program, his recruiting. I mean, all the things that it takes to win the offseason, right? And then you go out and you got to win the regular season.
Sure.
Then you got an opportunity to try to win the bowl season. So he's attacking it the correct way. I love what he's doing, but most importantly, I'm really impressed by him as an individual. That's the really impressive part. It's so easy to get behind him when you talk to him, right, and really get to know him, because he wears his emotions on his sleeve. He tells you what he's thinking, and he's got one purpose, his job, and his sole purpose is to make University of Notre Dame a championship program, and I think that's what he set out to do.
That is very exciting. I had a chance to spend some time on another podcast with him, and I feel the exact same way. As a matter of fact, I was ready to suit up. I'm now 52, and I was ready to put the pad. I got maybe like a 15-second window. Then after that, I'm done. You got like 15 seconds. You got 15
That's
seconds.
It. That's right. That's right.
Well, and I think it's amazing when you think about obviously what's going on in the NFL. We have a black head coach at the University of Notre Dame. And although it's not very common, so it's kind of going to lead to kind of my next question. As a freshman coming in, what was your experience as a black student athlete at Notre Dame?
My experience was very intense because, I came from a high school. We had 4,000 kids in the high school, and I think we had 2 non-black kids, right? So it was just like, whoa. All I knew was going to school with black kids. I didn't experience going to school with white kids. I didn't experience any of that. So for me, it was a culture shock. I didn't know how to deal with I had a white roommate, right? Well, think about this. The only at that point white people that I had ever dealt with was the people at the grocery store, my teachers, and I mean just the people in my direct to reach and touch. So I didn't have an experience. So how do I communicate with this young man about an issue in our dorm room, right? And growing up in the inner city, the way we dealt with issues is, with aggression. And so you had to learn how to communicate, how to talk
Sure.
things out. That was nothing that I had never done that,
Wow.
So for me, it was very intense because these are all things that I had no experience in, had
Mm.
no knowledge of, and was just thrust into this position and had to figure it out. So it was definitely a challenge.
Well, I've had a chance to talk to several guys, and Ronaldo Wynn talked about how, like, the first couple weeks, he was kind of in the same situation you were. Grew up in south side of Chicago, and when he came to Notre Dame, had not experienced this kind of white population, and for the first 2 weeks, he did not speak to his roommate. I mean, imagine that, right? I mean, that was just kind of, I mean, that's so bizarre. And for those folks who might not kind of understand that dynamic, I mean, and I think you kind of summed it up perfectly. I mean, you spent the majority of your life in this certain type of community, and now you're placed in a totally different type of community. How do you react? And that's just
Absolutely.
so interesting.
Yeah, it's the environment, right? You grew up in one environment. Now you are just you're picked up, transplanted, and just dropped into another environment. And it's one of those. I understand. So it seems so strange that he didn't talk to his roommate for 2 weeks, right? It's like, wow. But I get it. I understand why, because what he didn't want to do was have this conversation. It end bad, and he reach across him and sock him in the eye,
Right.
or grab him by the neck, or grab his shirt, and all of a sudden he's on his way back to the South Side of Chicago, right?
Exactly.
Kicked out of school.
Exactly.
So the fear of not making that mistake, because all you know is how you dealt with people in your area. If
Sure.
they say something disrespectful to you, then we're gonna deal
Right.
with it, right?
Right.
So when you don't know when you don't have the communication skills,
Exactly.
the fear is, you know what? Just let me be quiet, right? Let me not say anything. And that's kind of how I approached it, because I didn't want to get in trouble, because I'm thinking to myself, here's my roommate. He was 120 pounds soaking wet. And, here I am, this 235-pound freshman. And if he says something, out of line to me or crazy, then it's going to be a problem. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting kicked out of school. So that was always in the back of my head. Just don't screw up, because I didn't know how to communicate with anyone.
And by the way, you have class, you have practice. I mean,
right. On top of
right.
these issues that you're trying
Sure.
to manage and figure out in a totally new place, new surroundings, new environment. Dealing with school that is totally different than you have gone to school. So everything about it is foreign. And the only place where you feel any kind of comfort is on the football field. And oh, by the way, I'm a rookie and I'm a freshman, rather. I can't say a word. I got to shut up. I got to do what I'm told. And I'm trying to figure it out there too. Right? So it's a whirlwind for that young African-American player that comes to Notre Dame. And I think we need to recognize that and help with those tools.
Absolutely.
Just for some kids.
Absolutely. Jerome, and what's so interesting, and I'm glad you kind of shared that with us, because a lot of times people just assume, hey, you're a name, you're a jersey number, you're a freshman there. We get a recruiting list. Oh, this is what he's about. This is what's going on. And no one really knows how some of these kids have to deal with something that may be so common and so easy for someone else. Yet, I mean, this is a daily occurrence, and a lot of people might not understand that. So thank you very much for kind of sharing that story with us. Kind of along those lines, so now let's talk about the reverse side, right? So you spent a year at Notre Dame. Now you go back to your neighborhood. Did folks look at you differently? I mean, what was that type of interaction?
Well, actually, they actually kind of gave me a nod, because how they knew how difficult it would have to be to go to this big old university, and you're doing all this stuff, you're playing, and other players before me, they hadn't fared well.
Mm.
They got kicked out of school, or they're
Wow.
back in the neighborhood. So they they've seen it happen,
Ugh.
right? So it was like, oh man, you did it. You got through this year. I saw you, man. Great job. Keep it up. And so everybody was rooting for me because they knew the difficulties that I had to face, obviously going there and still being productive.
That's great to have that type of support when kind of, you just left an environment that was kind of shaky, again, all these things adding up. Then all of a sudden, normally when you kind of came back, because of the experiences in your neighborhood, they were supporting you. They wanted you to do well. And like you said, some of the guys, they went, didn't work out, they came back, and they, the folks in the community had seen them fail. And so for them to support you is just absolutely terrific, man. That had to be a great feeling.
Yeah, it was a great feeling because I mean, you knew that they were. Now, of course, you had some people that they were haters, and they say, "Oh man, you'll be back, you'll be back, you'll do this, you're not that good." And so, but all that does is create that energy that you need to propel forward, right? But for the most part, it was a positive message that was coming from the guys of wanting me to go out there and have success.
That's great. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit. So let's take you to draft day. And I mean, you had an amazing career at Notre Dame. What was it like to hear your name called in the first round of the NFL draft?
That was, it was amazing because that was never the dream. So for me, my dream was getting to college. I didn't think I was going to play in the NFL. That was never, I didn't say I'm going to Notre Dame, I'm going to the league, I'm playing in the NFL. that was never my plan. I said, I'm going to go to Notre Dame, I'm going to get an engineering degree, and we'll see what happens from there. That was my plan. And then when obviously plans changed, and the success came, and so then I said to myself, man, this is actually happening, right? I'm going to have a career playing football, right? And so at that point, I was like, wow, this is a big moment, not only for myself, but for my family as well. This gave me an opportunity to help secure my family and not just myself. So that's what I was more proud of, that I was going to be able to support my family. And the first thing I did when I signed, I bought my mom and dad a house in Detroit, and that was the biggest moment to this day in my career, to be able to do that for them and change the stars, if you will, right? Change my trajectory.
Absolutely.
And so that was an incredible moment for me.
And when you say change the trajectory, you're talking about for generations at that point, right? And, you take care of your parents, but now you're talking about your kids and then your kids' kids, because now you've set a standard, not that your parents didn't, but you were able to set a standard that now, I mean, it becomes like real, like the future of your kids, which is a tremendous responsibility.
It is, and the beautiful part is it's not just me, my family. Now I have two nieces. One's already graduated from Michigan State, unfortunately. The other one is at Drexel. She's on a path to graduate. My kids, 100% going to college. And so now all of a sudden, the next generation of the Bettis family are all in line for degrees. When my generation, none of us had. So that's progress, right? And that's how generationally, as African Americans, that's how we progress. That's how we develop as a people, through education, through each generation raising the standard, right? Hey, This is what my parents did. This is what I'm going to do.
Right.
This is what I expect of my children.
Right.
And forward and going forward. And that's how we elevate ourselves in the world that we live in. And it's through that educational process.
That is absolutely amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to a special edition of the Zorich podcast with the Holtz Heroes Foundation celebrating Black History Month. You're listening to Jerome Bettis, one of our amazing student athletes that played at Notre Dame during the Holtz's era. So when you now are in the pros, how do you feel Notre Dame prepared you for the NFL?
You know, I thought Notre Dame prepared me very well. Clearly on the field, playing the best players, the best schools in the country,
Sure.
allowed us to play the best players in the country. Those who I would eventually go on to play against in
Right.
the NFL. So on the field, it prepared us tremendously. Off the field, I thought Notre Dame did a great job of teaching us how to communicate. And one of that was, I'll never forget, Coach Holtz, in front of the team meeting, he had the seats down there, and he made I'll never forget, as a freshman, he made me sit down in front of him, in front of the whole team, and he had an interview, right? And I got a microphone on and all this, and I'm like,
Wow.
and he's interviewing me, and I'm like, wow. And so they recorded that, and then they played it back to me. Hey, you got to see your posture. You got to do this. Listen up what you're saying.
Right.
Take a second before you answer the question. And so that was that training that I got at an early age, because what Notre Dame understood, that it wasn't when you get to the NFL when that's needed. It's needed now, because we are a quasi NFL team, because we get this much exposure. So we need our players to be exposed to that, ready to go, and have the ability to communicate. And so I just thought that did so much for me throughout my career, because I could always trace back to that moment that gave me that stepping stone to be able to communicate in a conversation like this, or an interview with somebody sticking a microphone in my hand and me not saying the worst thing in the world, right? I understood that because of having that head coach interview me when I was the most nervous you could have ever been.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, kind of along with that, so one of Coach Holtz's mantras was trust, love, and commitment. So when you hear that, what does that mean to you from your experience?
Well, for me, I think it means, the path for success. And when you hear trust, love, commitment, it's not a football thing, it's not a basketball thing, it's not a sport thing, it's a life thing.
Exactly.
It's a life thing. If you love what you do, and if you're committed to doing it, and you can actually trust the process, then you're going to be successful. And I don't care what mode of life of work that you're in, right? If you love it, and if you committed to it, right? And if you love it, you committed to it, that means you're willing to do whatever, sacrifice for it, right? And if you trust what you're doing, trust the people around you, trust that you're on the correct path, then you're going to be successful. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? And for a coach to instill that in us, such at an early age, in an early point in all of our lives, right? When we are the most influential, or being the most influenced, right? At that time, and then for him to keep drilling that down, I mean, he just drilled it down. It was every single game, and he put it on the board, and I mean, he just kind of bang, but you got it, right?
Right, exactly.
And once we all stepped away from it, we could all speak to it. And then we can all draw back our experience and say, oh, wow, when I think about that, trust, love, and commitment was there. Trust, love, and commitment was there, right? And you can see how those things, yeah, you're right. That was part of that decision.
Right.
That was part of that success in my life personally, not necessarily football wise.
Right.
And then you start understanding that. And now I don't think there's anybody that played for Coach Holtz that's not a believer, right? Not a believer. I don't think there's anybody because we all know that that's the truth. When he's speaking the truth, and now we understand it. And now we're the next generation. We're taking that
right
and paying it forward by continuing to talk about it. Right. The fact that you just mentioned it to me it meant that it burned an indelible footprint in your mind. Right. You will never forget it. And so for you to tell, I will never forget. And so that's how we're able to grow from it and learn from those incredible words that he spoke.
Well, I think it's so interesting, Jerome, because you've talked about kind of instances, right? Oh yeah, this happened. Okay, this happened. But I think what's great about that is, you weren't thinking at the time when those situations happened, trust, love, and commitment. But innately, because of the years, again, you're 18 years old, you walk in there, trust, love, right. There's a room 100 guys, and you're like, love, like, there's a bunch of dudes in here. What are you talking about love? But then you evolve, right, from that to now you're making decisions, you're making choices, and it's not necessarily running, okay, trust, love, commitment, but because it's innately embedded in our DNA now, then those decisions, as you mentioned, are being made. And then you can think back and go, oh, wow, that's how I got to that decision.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing how he was able to program us in a way through that continuous message, sure. Right? And he presented in such a way that you heard it, but it wasn't. It was all the things that you ultimately came to believe. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, I care for my teammates. I love you guys. I trust you guys. I'm committed to the program, to the process. We're gonna get this done. And so that became kind of the underlining, value system that we created, right? And our moral compass, if you will. And we started to then kind of branch off and do all different kind of things, but we've all kept that foundational building block that he gave us at such an early age, and that we kind of put in our back pocket. And that's kind of from where we draw our strength and where we build our decisions going forward.
Jerome, that is absolutely terrific. I got one more question, but you kind of alluded to it in the beginning. What are you doing now? You decide to go back to school. You're a student at Notre Dame. I think it's great. You're setting an amazing example, not only to your family, but to the thousands and thousands of people out there that saw you go back to school, make that decision. Again, it wasn't very easy, but here's an individual that has literally climbed the mountaintop, created other mountaintops for other people, yet you felt that you wanted to go back and you did it. So I commend you for that. Do you have anything you want to say about kind of that experience and for other folks?
Well, it's great that people see it and are inspired by it because I wholeheartedly believe that education is the pathway, right, to success. And so as we understand that and more people decide, hey, we want to do this, I think ultimately we're all better for it. And so if I can, get that, 62-year-old guy says, man, I want to go back and finish up. I promise you, he's going to be more productive in the last phase of his life, right? And so I just wanted to do it, but also I wanted to show people that there's always that opportunity. We all say, maybe next year. There's always that opportunity to be the best version of yourself. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. Just be the best version of myself I can possibly be. That includes me now going back to school, getting my degree, and trying to really, pay that forward and help now some other people get their degree. Because once we see that, then they're going to be more successful in everything that they do, because they know that they committed to something.
Right.
They trusted it, and they love where they are and who they are because of what they did.
Jerome, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for taking up time out of your school schedule. Now I can say that.
I'm studying.
So thank you so much. We do appreciate that. This has been great.
Right.
See, look at that. That's very impressive. You're a great student now. See, that's very impressive. We want to thank Reggie Brooks, the executive director of the Holtz Heroes Foundation, for coming up with this idea of celebrating our Black student athletes who were at Notre Dame during the Coach Holtz era, because y'all have done some amazing things. And if not anything else, any success you had, having a chance to see and have people realize that you're going back to school after you've accomplished so much is just another reason why you're just an amazing leader in our community. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Coach Holtz Foundation again for giving us this opportunity. I'm excited about what the future has for you. I cannot wait until you're finished. I want to see how those grades are. So we'll have a chance to celebrate after that. Jerome, thank you so much for this opportunity.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, brother.